Hey friends, welcome back to Acre Homestead. We have a busy day in the kitchen processing a whole lot of tomatoes. This is just one of probably 5 baskets I have this size, and a whole lot of onions. What we're going to be doing today is we are going to be making homemade sloppy joe base and ketchup. I love sloppy joes, and if you've watched any of my freezer videos where we do bulk freezer cooking, I make sloppy joes all the time and I throw them in the freezer. But this, we're gonna make just the base, the sauce. And when I wanna make sloppy joes, all I have to do is ground beef, and then I open a can of this base and we are good to go. So, before we do that though, I'm gonna show you how I process my black pepper. I love black pepper, but I don't like grinding it all the time. So what I do is I take whole peppercorns, I throw them in my blender, and I blend them up. And here is the last of the black pepper. So easy, and now I have to not think about black pepper for a while. And trust me, this tastes better than any black pepper you can buy at the store that's pre-ground. I love this stuff. Give it a try, and then you don't have to use a pepper grinder every time you want to use pepper. Now that we have the pepper done, we can start processing these tomatoes and onions into ketchup and sloppy joe base. One of the main reasons I want to get this done today is because we have a lot of tomatoes in those 2 brown paper bags down there. Those are full with tomatoes too. And tomorrow I need to go down to the garden and do a massive harvest. So instead of throwing these tomatoes in the freezer, because I have hardly any freezer space, we're gonna go ahead and process them and get them into jars. I have weighed out 24 pounds of Roma tomatoes. We're gonna use Roma tomatoes for our ketchup. And then we are gonna be kind of adapting 2 different recipes. We have our Ball Complete Guide to Home Preservation. We've got a recipe here, and then I have one online that I found. I can link both of these down in the description box, but we're going to use both of them in order to make, hopefully, an award-winning ketchup. This Portland ketchup is Josh and I's absolute favorite ketchup, and it is expensive. I bought a case of it through Azure when it was on sale, and it was about $3 a bottle. But if I go to my local Kroger store, this is $5.50 a bottle, which is just way more than we can spend on a little bottle of ketchup. So the goal is to try to mimic this ketchup. So I read the back of the ingredients, and it's water, tomato paste, white distilled vinegar. That's one of the things I'm gonna change from the Ball book. The Ball book uses cider vinegar. We're gonna use white distilled, cane sugar, sea salt, onions, allspice, cayenne pepper, and ground clove. So we're gonna see if we can mimic this ketchup. I can go ahead and use this blender even though it had peppers in it, or pepper in it, because that'll be fine in our ketchup. And we're gonna go ahead and blend up our 24 pounds of tomatoes. This does not have to be perfect because we are gonna cook this down and run it through a food mill. I have not yet decided if we're gonna double this recipe or not. It just depends on how many tomatoes I have. We are gonna use our large stock pot here to get this going, and I'm just gonna keep blending all this up until we have all of our tomatoes blended. I do wanna get some of our onions in the blender actually, and so what I'm gonna do is blend just a few tomatoes in here first to get some liquid going. So what I'm gonna do is finally chop up 3 cups of onions, and we're gonna throw these in the blender as well. I've just decided I'm gonna go ahead and double this ketchup recipe. I have plenty of tomatoes between what I have sitting out here and the tomatoes I have in my freezer. I have enough to double this. So we need 6 cups of onions. This is a 2-cup measure, so we'll fill this 3 times. that was the last batch of our first basket. Now we need to weigh out 24 more pounds of tomatoes. This recipe says that it makes only 6 pints. So if I'm gonna go through the effort of making ketchup, I would rather make more than 6 pints. So that's why we're gonna go ahead and double it. I do have my scale out, so I'll be able to weigh out our poundages we need for the tomatoes. But I also know that one full basket was 24 pounds, so we're gonna try to fill this up. I'm mostly trying to use Roma tomatoes for this recipe. Oh, there's a tomatillo I found. That's probably about 24 pounds. Let's weigh that. Perfect. We're at 25 pounds, and I'm going to count this basket as at least 1 pound. Could I use a immersion blender or hand blender to do this? Absolutely, I could. I just don't have one. Mine is broken. It's probably one of my favorite canning essentials. I just haven't ordered one or gone to the store to get one, so I'm just using what I have, and that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to just limp along, but if I were you, I would recommend go get yourself an immersion blender for big canning days like this. What we're gonna do is let this tomato onion mixture cook down for about a half an hour, maybe an hour, and then we're gonna run it through the food mill. We have all of our tomatoes and onions for our ketchup in our 30-quart stock pot. And now we're gonna get going on our sloppy joe base. This is why I love doing multiple recipes at one time, because I can focus on doing something else while this cooks down. Because this is gonna take, because it's so big, I'm gonna take probably an hour to let this start to cook, and then we'll do the next step on this. But in the meantime, we have my big roaster out to make our sloppy joe base. I'm all about, if we're gonna get the kitchen a little bit messy, we're gonna get our blender messy, we're gonna use that up again, our cutting board, our knives. We might as well get more done at a time, so we're just being as efficient as possible. So I need to dice up 12 cups of onions, and this is a water bath canning recipe, so we don't need to pressure cook it, even though there's gonna be a lot of onions and a lot of peppers, and all of these onions and peppers are gonna be from the garden, and I'm really excited about that. I'm gonna use red and white onions because that's what I have. This is technically a ball canning recipe that I'm adjusting yet again, and I feel comfortable doing that. I'm going to be keeping, though, the onions, peppers, tomatoes, and vinegar ratio exactly the same, and I'm just gonna be adjusting some of the seasonings because I want it to taste like my normal sloppy joe recipe. Yesterday was a really big computer work day for me, and so after I was done sitting at my desk for 10 hours, I went ahead and I went outside and I peeled all these onions, and it was so relaxing. We're gonna chop all the onions today, and I'll freeze whatever we don't end up using. So in our roaster, I'm gonna turn both burners on. I use this all the time to make big bulk batches of things. I love this thing. We're gonna put some olive oil in here. We're basically just making the sloppy joe base just like you would. We're just not adding any of the meat to it. So that's 2, 4, 6 cups of onions. Now that we have our onions in here, we're gonna add our peppers. Now the recipe calls for 3 cups of green peppers and 3 cups of red peppers. I only have green, so we're gonna use just green peppers, and I'm tripling this recipe, so I need 9 cups of red and 9 cups of green, so we need 18 cups of green peppers. There are our peppers. So that's 100% homegrown onions and peppers. So now we're gonna let this cook just like we would if we were making sloppy joes. And we're gonna get going on peeling a bunch of garlic. Our onions and peppers are nice and soft now, so we're going to start adding the rest of the ingredients. This has been really easy to throw together. So we're going to add tomato paste. So because I'm tripling this recipe, we're going to add 1.5 cups of tomato paste. We're going to add black pepper. This is that fresh pepper we just ground. Salt, brown sugar. This recipe calls for 1.5 cups of mustard. That is way too much mustard for sloppy joes for us. So I'm going to start with about 1/3 cup, and I just got mustard all over my backsplash. We're going to start with that. 1.5 cups of apple cider vinegar. The reason I thought that this would be a good thing to make right now is you use a lot of ketchup when you're making sloppy joes, and basically you're making the ketchup with the onions and peppers and everything else. So instead of making ketchup, opening ketchup to make sloppy joes down the road, I'm just going to make the sloppy joe mix right now. You cannot reduce the amount of vinegar you put in there. That was 1.5 cups of apple cider vinegar. I'm going to add some paprika. That's everything we need for the base except for the tomato sauce. So that's the next thing we're going to add. But we want all these spices and that tomato paste to kind of cook down a little bit and thicken this. Oh, I was going to add, this is not in the recipe, about 1/4 cup of Worcestershire. I think Worcestershire needs to go in any beef dish. So we're going to add that. We may be adding more mustard, but we just want to taste it first. That looks so good already. Yum. I'm excited about this. And this is the mustard mess I just made. So we're gonna clean as we go before that dries and makes it a lot harder to clean off. I don't remember where I heard that tip, but the tip was if you splash or spill something, wipe it up while it's still wet before it dries, because then you don't have to put as much elbow grease into it later. And I try to do that. I don't always do it, but it does seem to help. So now let's get the tomato sauce blended up that we need to add in here. We need 12 cups of tomato puree, so I'm going to grab some of these tomatoes. And we're going to blend these up just like we did earlier. I'm going through and trying to pick the most ripe ones so that we don't, lose any. This is probably more than 12 cups, but we'll start with this. I've got measuring on my blender so I can blend it and add up the cups. So this is 8 cups here. And I'm going to blend this up really smooth. So that's 8 cups right there. I've talked about this before, that when I made ketchup last time, 2 years ago, because I didn't make it last year, I had enough. I did not de-seed or de-peel my tomatoes, and I did not like the texture that came out for the ketchup, for like a dipping ketchup condiment that you would put on burgers or for French fries. But, I dropped my spatula. But I would use it in things like sloppy joes, and you didn't even notice that there were peels and seeds in it. So that's why I'm not taking the time to peel and de-seed the tomatoes for this for the sloppy joes, because I don't think it's necessary. That's one of the reasons why I'm really excited about this recipe, is because I can make a beautiful condiment and take the effort to de-seed and de-peel this, but for something like sloppy joes, I don't have to take my really nice condiment and use that in the sloppy joes. This is almost ready. We need to get the last of the tomatoes in here, and then we're gonna start processing our ketchup. We need 4 more cups. And there we go, that's 4 more cups. We're gonna let this cook down a little bit, and then we're gonna give it a taste test. That's why I left all the ingredients out, and if we need to adjust the flavors, we can, but we want this to thicken up really nicely. So this is where we are gonna process the tomatoes. This has been cooking for a while now. We have our sauce master where we're gonna seed, de-seed, and de-peel our tomatoes with this. I kind of have a little setup here. I bring in this little table so I can put my canning pot on it, and I can get this bowl a little bit closer to the mill. All we're gonna do is take our tomato onion mixture and run it through the sauce mill. I was watching Flower Hill Farm and seeing how she processes her tomatoes, and she has an electric one of these. I think if you are going to do huge batches of things, that the electric one might be a better option. This does take a while. I had the time to do it today, so it was totally fine to do it, but I may consider investing in an electric one moving forward, but for now this works great. I filled up 1 bowl, and so I'm going to go ahead and use my water bath canner as a vessel in order to catch more of the tomato sauce. And I am going to process that pulp that we are skimming off, so you can stay tuned to see how we're going to go ahead and preserve that up as well. We also do some other food preservation projects at the end of this day, so if you want to stick around, you will be able to see us do a couple pressure canning projects. So I'm going to run all of this pulp through one more time just to make sure we get as much of it out as possible. We're definitely getting a lot more pulp out of here by running this through one more time. All right, we got this all done. It seems super liquidy, like this is gonna take forever and a day for it to cook down. But we're gonna get it back on the stove. We're gonna get this back on the stove and cook it down till it thickens up. That just seems super runny, like it's gonna take, oh man, a long time. But in the meantime, we can get the sloppy joes canned up because those are done. So I'm going to turn this on relatively high because this has got to really boil down a lot. This is looking perfect. It's thickened up beautifully. I do want to give it a taste test before we jar it up. Wow. That is delicious. That is so good. I think it's ready to be jarred up. I'm going to get the water bath canner on the stove to start warming up. I need to rinse it out, but because this is hot, we need the water in the canner to be pretty warm. I'm probably going to get at least one more water bath canner going, but we're going to start with one real quick here. I think I'm going to get one more because I know that I'm going to be able to fit, well, I don't know. let's start with that. I have washed jars here. It's hot. You don't need to sterilize your jars, just as long as they're clean. So I just run them through the dishwasher prior to filling them. I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch headspace. This is the first time that I've ever kind of attempted to can a convenience meal, even though I still have to thaw and brown ground beef in order to make sloppy joes. It's going to be really nice when I go to make them because I'm not going to have to get out all the different ingredients in order to make it. I do want to start getting into canning some convenience meals. I just have never done it. So that's one thing that I think I want to do a little bit of research and try to do before December. A couple of them I overfilled a little bit, so I'm just going to evenly distribute it throughout. I want about a 1/2 inch of headspace on each one. I did have this much, and I'm going to leave this and I'm going to make dinner with it tomorrow or tonight. I'm not sure. We have our stovetop canner getting ready to boil here. We've got 3 more jars that are going to be for round 2. And then I decided to go ahead and get out my electric canner, and we're going to water bath can these jars in here. We have 2, 4, 6, 8 pints in here, and we're going to do for 20 minutes. I am going to set the lid on. For water bath canning though, we don't need to put the weight or anything on here, so we're just gonna let this go. That's the nice thing about this one. I don't have to think about this one. It's gonna do all the steps for me. Once I hit start and have it warming. So this is now going, and let's add the next ingredients we need to add to our ketchup. To our ketchup pot, we need to add 3 cups of sugar. This is a 1/2 cup measure, so we're going to add 6 of these. 6 cups of white distilled vinegar. This is a 2 cup measure, so I'm going to add 3 of these. And it looks like I'm going to have to go grab 1 more. This is why during canning season I like to keep at least 3 gallons of vinegar, because this is my last one and it's half gone already. We're going to add 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper and a 1/2 cup of salt. Remember, this is a 30-quart pot here, so this is a lot. I don't know where my big stirring stick went, but we're going to get this all stirred up. I think this is going to take hours to cook down. Honestly, if I had some tomato paste, I probably would put tomato paste in this, but I used all of the tomato paste I have in my house for the sloppy joe mix. I normally don't add tomato paste to my sauces and things when I can, but I can totally see why you would for something like this, because this is so liquidy and ketchup is thick and rich, and it's going to take a long time. No wonder it says that this recipe calls for 24 pounds of tomatoes and it only makes 7 pints when this whole pot is a 30-quart pot. Our pressure canner is now boiling and it's counting down 20 minutes. This is now counting down 20 minutes because we're boiling here. So we are almost, well, in 20 minutes, we'll have our first jars out of the canners.
Since I now had 20 minutes, I thought I would sit down and process all of these onions. I love having pre-chopped onions and veggies of all kinds from the garden in the freezer because it makes mealtime making in the winter so much more convenient.
Our first canner load is done and it's been sitting for 5 minutes. So we can go ahead and take these jars out of the canner. I'm going to get the last of the Sloppy Joe base in the canners. I got all the onions chopped up except for this bag that I'm going to leave for fresh eating in the fridge. I might leave this bag in the fridge too to make hot sauce because we're going to be making that peach hot sauce here pretty soon. And then these 2 bags are going in the freezer. I did reuse the bag that I had the peppers in. I try to reuse bags as much as possible. You can't always, but in this instance, I could. And now I have 3 bags of chopped onions for the freezer. I'm actually quite shocked how many onions I've been able to get from that little onion harvest. I mean, it was a lot of onions, but they were all so little, so I didn't think it was going to amount to much, but it's amounting to more than I would have expected, so I'm really happy about that. I reread the recipe on this ketchup, and it says that this ketchup needs to reduce by half, and it should take about 45 minutes. There is no way. This has already been going for probably an hour and a half. So as soon as this canner load is done, it has 7 more minutes. I could leave even before it's done because it's an electric pressure canner. I need to go run down and get more jars because I don't even have enough pint jars to jar this ketchup up. I think I'm going to grab some tomato paste and I'm going to put some tomato paste in this ketchup because that's a lot to reduce. It's probably reduced by about 1.5 inches and it needs to reduce to about here. So in the meantime though, I don't want to waste this opportunity to freeze dry and make some tomato powder. So I'm going to freeze dry this pulp and then I'll powder it up. And I've heard that this makes a delicious seasoning in all sorts of different types of soups and chilies and things. So I'm excited to try this. And it does become a little bit of a thickening agent. But I don't want to run my freeze dryer empty, so I'm going to do 1 tray full of this pulp. And then I'm going to fill up the rest of these trays with a bunch of tomatoes. I have never freeze-dried tomatoes. I dehydrate tomatoes usually every year, and I use those to thicken up that one sauce, and I loved it. So I think I'm gonna like freeze-dried tomatoes. I'm gonna do really big slices so that I can fit more on my freeze dryer. You can see just how thick of slices I'm doing. I want these nice and big. The more I can fit on this freeze dryer tray, the better.
I'm just absolutely blown away by how well my tomatoes produced this year. Even though they were in a neglected garden, a neglected garden can still be very productive. These are mostly heirloom tomatoes, not all of them, but the ones that are, some of them kind of have a little bit of like scarring on the bottom, so I did just cut that off. Those pieces of tomatoes will not go to waste. The chickens will surely enjoy them. I've been loving having the chickens here because I can just feed them all the scraps really easily and I don't have to transport it to a different place.
These trays are ready for the freeze dryer, and I had a thought. I think these tomato slices would go really good on top of quiche. Even just plop them freeze dried on top of the quiche, let the quiche kind of rehydrate them, bake them. We are going to try that together. So they're going to go straight in the freeze dryer. Freeze dryer's going, all the canners are done. So I'm going to head out and go get some more jars and some tomato paste. I'm going to bring these bad tomatoes and tomato ends to the chickens. They're going to go enjoy those, and we will be back to add some tomato paste to this. And then between the two different ketchup recipes that I'm following, one that I found online and the one in the ball book, one called for twice as much sugar as the other one. So when I put the sugar in this pot, I used the minimal amount of sugar. So because we're going to be adding some tomato paste, it might add some extra acidity. So we may have to, when we taste it, adjust the sugar content. But for now, I am going to go ahead and run those errands. I did kind of tidy up a little bit. I got the dishwasher loaded. I had the sink almost empty. I got some ground beef out to make sloppy joes.
This is a day and a half in the future, and I took out the tomatoes from the freeze dryer. They turned out beautifully. They are nice and dry. I put these slices in a jar, and then I take this pulp, and what we're going to do with this pulp is we are going to blend this up in our high-powered blender, and we are going to make a powder out of it. You can use this, apparently, I've never used it before, as a tomato paste replacer because it will do a really good job thickening up soups or stews, and that's how I plan to use it. And I've also heard that it's really, really good as a seasoning. So we've got our now tomato powder here, and we're using every bit of the tomatoes, and we have our tomato slices.
I'm back. I just turned this on high again. I grabbed 2 boxes of these jars. They were on sale. I've never used them before, but we're gonna give them a try today. They were only $8.20, I think, or something for a 12 pack, which is a great price. And right before I left, I was reassessing my tomato table where I have my butternut squash, and I noticed this is tragic. There is a bad spot on this butternut squash, and there's some mold on the stem. I'm not sure what that's all about. So we're gonna cut this open, and I think we're gonna attempt to pressure can it. This one has a little nibble at it. I don't remember seeing that when I took this out of the garden, but some animal or something must have nibbled on it. And if you were there when I harvested this one, I broke the stem. So we're gonna get the tomato paste in the ketchup first, and then we're gonna attempt to pressure can this butternut squash because I don't have any plans to use it right now, and I think, or maybe we'll freeze it. So I don't know how many we're gonna put into our ketchup. If I had known I was gonna do this, I would have bought it through Azure and bought those little glass ones because I like the quality of that tomato paste better than this, but it is what it is, and we are gonna make do. Maybe we'll start with 4 of them. I bought 6 or 7, I think. Maybe we will end up adding all 7, I don't know. I just can't imagine how this is gonna thicken up. It's just so liquidy. This is the first time I've ever made anything with just Roma tomatoes, which I thought Roma tomatoes were supposed to be a lot pastier and thicker, and I didn't really think we would have to do something like this because of the fact that we used Roma tomatoes, but it's okay. I was just rereading the recipe to see if it called for tomato paste, and it doesn't. I need to get my apron back on. I've never pressure canned squash before. I've never canned squash before, and it does need to be pressure canned. Look how beautiful that is. But I did look up the directions, and I think this is going to be the easiest way to preserve this squash, especially because I'm running out of freezer space, and we're going to use our electric pressure canner. So all I'm going to do is cut off the top and bottom and peel the skins.
According to proper canning technique, you cannot can pumpkin or winter squash puree. It has to be canned in chunks. So what I'm going to do after peeling all of the squash, we are going to cut these into 1-inch cubes, and we're going to get them in the jars. I have a couple different ideas of how I want to use this. My thought is, because when it comes out of the pressure canner, because it cans for 90 minutes, it's going to be very, very soft. So I could use it in either soups. I could drain the liquid and put it in soups. Josh and I do like butternut squash soup, and it'll actually be faster to cook the soup because the squash is already pre-cooked. Or I can drain the liquid and I can mash it up and I can make anything I would make pumpkin with, and it wouldn't be hard to mash it up because it's already pre-cooked. So I've got a couple different ideas. I've never done this before, so I'm not sure how I like it. I have full faith that I think I'm going to like it. And the nice thing about having it in the jar is I don't have to worry about it going bad on my pantry shelf. And so we will see how this ends up working for us.
With those 3 butternut squash, we got 3 quarts and a pint. We did lose about half of the bottom part of one of the butternut squash, so our loss is the chicken's gain. They will enjoy all those seeds and yummy goodness. So let me show you how easy it is to finish this up to prep for the pressure cooker. Pressure canner. We are gonna can these in the pressure canner. You cannot water bath can butternut squash. So we're gonna fill it up with water, just regular water.
And you do want to leave about an inch headspace, and I do go and I kind of push down the squash to get any air bubbles out and just make sure that everything is submerged in the water. Wipe the rim, and we are going to put a new lid and a ring on. This is probably one of the easiest things I've ever canned before. Pressure canning seems so intimidating, and the more I do it, because I'm still relatively new to it, the more I realize it is super, super easy, and it's probably almost easier than a lot of the water bath canning recipes because you don't have to actually make a big recipe. And we're going to use the electric pressure canner today to do this, and so I don't even have to think about it. This is going to can, like I said, for 90 minutes, and all I have to do is push the start button, and I don't even have to think about it one more time.
I did go ahead and add the other 3 cans of tomato paste, so that's a total of 7 cans in here. And I can tell with the way it's bubbling that it's definitely starting to thicken up. You can see how big and bubbly these bubbles are, so I think that tomato paste is doing the trick. I did go ahead and just hand wash all of our jars so that we have clean jars. That's the thing about having to go run and get jars, is I didn't have time to wash them in the dishwasher.
Now that our ketchup is boiling away on the stove, I take this time to go ahead and just start tidying up the kitchen. After doing a long canning day like this, sometimes just things feel a little bit sticky, and it's just good to give everything a nice scrub and just kind of make sure that the kitchen is clean after a big kitchen day. Also, I did go ahead and sweep because I make messes. The floors are always dirty after I spend time in the kitchen. I didn't end up making the sloppy joes on this night because we had some leftovers and I just didn't quite have the energy to make sloppy joes. So I thought, you know what, let's just go ahead and enjoy the leftovers so we don't have to make any more messes in the kitchen. I am filling up a little bit of water here so that we can water bath can this ketchup, but you'll see in a minute that you'll just see in a minute.
I am not gonna lie, I am done. I am done for the night. Now this has cooked down quite a bit, but it's got a while to go. So I'm gonna turn this on really low and then I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna let it come down to room temperature. We're gonna stick this in the fridge and we are gonna can this another night. This, I will show you what it looks like when it comes out as well. I'm excited to have this. I've got a lot of ideas for this product and I think it's gonna be great. Tomorrow, I'm going down to the garden to do a massive harvest, so I don't want to push myself too hard tonight and just have absolutely no energy tomorrow. So that's why I'm not going to try to stay up to can this tonight. We got a lot done already. I'm thinking when it comes to ketchup, the tomato paste is the call, so I'll make a note of that for next year. And I'll make sure that I have the tomato paste that I like to keep on hand in order to do that. So we will be back when we fill these jars with that ketchup.